Adam,
Yeah,
is this an ad?
this is an ad for Mutinex. Mutinex are a marketing mix modeling company.
Why do I need one of those?
Well, then you can model the return on every single marketing decision you do.
So you wouldn't do an ad like this?
You'll never have to do an ad like this ever again.
Mutinex Growth OS, your best decisions start here. For more information or to request a demo, visit mutinex.co. That's mutinex.co. Hi guys, Brent here. Just dropping in because it would be remiss of us not to say congratulations to Erin Riley, because since we recorded this episode with her, she's been promoted to the massive role of CEO of TBWA globally. And after you listen to this episode, I'm sure you'll agree that TBWA is in great hands moving forward. Big congrats to Erin. Big congrats to TBWA. Let's get on with the show.
I'm amazed that the traditional agency model is still an art director and a copywriter, lots of layers of creatives, and then they have account service next to them, and then they have planners next to them. Then there's a production department down the bottom, and there's a media agency in a different company.
Not all of our accounts operate that way, and not all of our agencies operate that way, but we're a little left of center on that. I wouldn't say that we've blown it up. I think that's why I'm sort of welcoming what feels like the seismic shift in the business that might actually be the seismic shift in the business.
Welcome back to Black T-Shirts. Hello, Adam.
Hey, Brent, how are you?
Very good, very good. Now,
I think we have been pro indie agency, and I think there's lots of momentum for independent agencies in Australia and around the world, and I think that's fascinating. There are lots of big global networks who seem to know what they're doing as well, and maybe their voice hasn't been heard as much in the debate at the moment.
lovely segue, because we actually have today on the show the CEO of the US operations of TBWA, the disruption agency. Erin, welcome.
Hello, glad to be here.
Good to have you.
Erin, before we get into the nuts and bolts of this, just tell us a little bit about yourself, and maybe just tell us about what you were like as a school kid in elementary school.
Yeah, oh my goodness. Well, I started off first and second grade in Catholic school, which I think probably did shape me a little bit. And then went to public school and always found a way to sort of break the rules from within the system, if you know what I mean. So I did student council, so I'd never be marked late because I would just be like, oh, I wasn't late for school. I was busy working on student council.
Why were you late?
Probably because I was doing my makeup for too long before leaving for school. I was running late. Now, anyone that knows me will be like, yeah, that checks out. She was late. I overcommit. I overestimate what I can achieve in the time.
Still to this day, you find yourself overcommitting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
That's not dissimilar to my son. He campaigned at his school to get the library hours to be open longer during recess. So there was equal opportunity. If you wanted to play sport, you could go to the sporting field. If you wanted to go to the library and hang out, you could go to the library.
Yeah, he's pro books.
And so, then how did you get into our industry?
Yeah, well, I went to school for broadcast journalism and political science because I was going to be a political correspondent.
Oh, what did you want to do? Did you want to be like in front of the camera, like anchor woman?
Yeah, on I guess Capitol Hill. I don't know, reporting. I think probably I ultimately wanted to be on like a morning show, but I thought I'd get there through being a political correspondent. And then I realized you had to read the paper every day. I mean, that dates me a bit, but you still read a newspaper and took like a civics test or whatever, like what's happening in the world test. And I was like, well, that's really boring. I don't think I like that. And I realized I would have to move to like a quite obscure town in the United States for the first like 10 years of my career. Didn't like that. Wanted to go to New York City straight away. And so was already in sort of the communication school and found my way to advertising, which actually seemed to be this perfect mix of needing to understand people and society and art and business and, rather cliched, but it was the intersection of all the things that interest me. And I was lucky enough to graduate and, find a job in New York working on L'Oreal, which is a brand that, spoke to me personally in in sort of an agency that was, McCann Erickson, so big agency, and sort of found my way from there.
So you started in a big network agency.
I
Now you
did.
run
I
a big
started,
network agency, but in
yeah,
between, BBH was
yeah,
quite a
indeed. That's right.
seminal
So
thing,
I
right?
spent a decade at BBH when they were still majority privately owned. So by the time I landed there, Publicis had bought 49%, but were incredibly recessive in our day-to-day lives. And
No
we
one's
certainly,
ever said that. No one ever has
no,
said that
I
about Publicis before, Erin, that they're recessive.
yes, I know it was a very, very special time there. Um, but yeah, very operated very independently. And then I went client side for a bit, worked at Cole Haan, and then Old Navy. And so really, and certainly BBH is famously when the world zigzags. TBWA is a disruption company. Cole Haan, at the time that I was there, was sort of reinventing themselves. They were kind of an 80-year-old startup, if you will. And even Old Navy at the time was really sort of pioneering this sort of fashion for all before it was as of the moment as it is now. Body positivity, inclusivity. I mean, they were showing mixed race families before that was a thing. And so I think while I've had different experiences, I think the through line has always been kind of convention breaking or a penchant for breaking the rules, but with lots of rigor, which it kind of goes back to the question you asked at the very beginning about my sort of how was I as a school child. I think that was probably always in there, a little bit of a dissenter, but have enough good Catholic guilt to like keep me kind of in line.
And do you feel
Breaking the rules with lots of what do you say? Lots of discipline,
Rigor.
lots of rigor.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
I love that. What's your job now? You're CEO of TBWA
US. Yeah.
US, and how many people do you look after?
Gosh, across the two agencies, we're probably 700 or so, maybe a little bit more. So it's really New York, LA, and Nashville.
I want to get straight into that. I want to get straight into what's the rigor and what's the disruption.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because you opened with this sort of setting up the paradigm between the independents and the networks, which of course, is the structure that we live in. I think at TBWA and certainly in the US where we really identify as Chiat Day, because the way that TBWA has come up in the world is kind of through the acquisitions of strong independents. We like very uniquely sit somewhere in between the two of those. I mean, we are undeniably a big global network, but like our heart, our spirit is very independent. So we talk a lot about being pirates. That's sort of our like spirit animal. And that dates all the way back to working with Steve Jobs on Apple and saying it's more fun to be a pirate than join the Navy. But, we are the disruption company. That is the methodology that sort of grounds our thinking, but it's also the thing that gives us our reason for being, our spirit, that notion of breaking convention. So I think we channel about as much independent energy as you're going to find, I think, in a network. But at the same time, we have a very big global footprint. We've got a lot of tools that we invest in. We have a very clear methodology, one that is based very much in rigor. And that's not to say, obviously, that, independents don't have that. Of course, they do. But I think we can shape shift a little bit into one or the other, depending on what the client needs.
so disruption? I feel like is one of those words that gets bandied around, even though you own it at TWA. Disruption, transformation. These are these words that sort of, love to be thrown around. What sort of unpack what disruption really is at TBWA? How does it work? Like, it's more than just a philosophy, right? It's also a way of working and a way of thinking. And so, yeah, just sort of color that in a little bit for us.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, at the most fundamental, it is really simple, and we have something that we call a roadmap that sort of frames it. It really is about looking at the conventions, and these are any of the factors that can sort of keep you in the status quo, that can pretty much drive like incremental growth. So this might be a category convention, a communications convention, an internal convention, just something that you do that is not necessarily bad. It's just, going to keep status quo. And then we really look at what we call the vision. And that is all about, what is a space or a place that could help you get to something that's more exponential in terms of growth, that could really sort of defy that convention. And the disruption is the idea, the behaviors that we sort of architect that could deliver that. So it's, it's going to Gatorade, a decade ago and saying, you're not a sports drink, you're a sports brand. At the time, that was totally disruptive for them to behave more like a sports brand. It's the same that we did for Airbnb. It was about not traveling like a tourist and, don't go there, live there, and those kinds of things. Again, hard to imagine now, but at that time, everyone was like, oh, I'm not going to sleep in a stranger's bed. And it was about completely reframing that category through the lens of authentic experience and not being a tourist, but someone that could feel like you would live there. So those are the kinds of examples of what we mean in terms of the methodology of disruption. Now, when it comes to the spirit, it really is about just pushing and pushing and pushing beyond the expected and beyond the gimmicks. I think a lot of agencies do those one-off sort of shiny objects really well. That is not disruption. That's where it is a much more rigorous thing, because it really has to be tied to a brand platform. It has to kind of make sense for where a brand is ultimately going over time for us to sort of embrace the disruption of it all.
Yeah, I've always thought BBH's thing of if you zig when everyone else is zagging, it's the fastest way to send you broke, because they're all zagging for a reason. That's where the market is. And if you zig out of that market, you're probably going to become irrelevant. So you have to zig within the zag, if you know what I mean. You have to know you have to know the rules of the game and stay within the rules of the game and then be different within that, rather than just being different for the sake of it. No, you don't. You're looking at me like I'm a freak.
No, it's like when you talked about the importance of conformity for kids as well. I thought you'd be more of a rule breaker.
Oh,
more of a zagger.
I'm sitting here in my black T-shirt in this kind of nice little environment on a podcast talking to two well-accomplished people. I'm definitely zagging within a zig or zigging within a zag.
What do you think about that, Erin? Do you think that's right?
Yeah, and I think BBH and TBWA would say that they agree, that this is not about sort of flights of indulgent fancy or some sort of crazy blow shit up. That in fact, we say a lot, disruption is not destruction. And I think what you're talking about is disruption. Disruption is calculated risk. Disruption is taking a leap where the scaffolding is all built on rigor. And then the last bit is, a little bit of like belief in the magic. And, I think Hegarty himself always talked about the balance of intelligence and magic. So I think in both places, they would say, actually, some conventions are good. Some zags are good, or zigs or zags, whatever it would be. But, but if you stay there forever, then, yes, you will probably continue to incrementally grow, but you will never get to a place that is beyond your imagination. You will never maybe expand or transcend your category. And I think, look, that doesn't happen very often. Sometimes the disruption is a micro disruption. It's, a casting that you didn't expect or a channel that you didn't expect. But sometimes it is transformative. With Airbnb, because we were able to set up sort of a transcendent positioning for that brand, they could very easily move into experience. Same thing for Gatorade. They now do wearables, they do, things that go far beyond sports drinks. And they might not have if they didn't say, we're a sports brand, not a sports drink brand.
Do you have an internal training program on your methodologies, or does it work more at a philosophical level?
It's definitely both. We say all the time, like, we fly a pirate flag, literally. It's hard to get people to play by the rules. Like, we're not good at color by number. But we are obviously invested in the methodology. And so there has to be some teaching around that. And our global CSO now, Jen Costello, does a good job of evangelizing and teaching the entire global network, through case studies, through tons of, we've been doing it for decades and decades. So there's no shortage of, examples.
What about your creative department? How is being a creative different at TBWA versus Ogilvy or Droga
can.
5, or I'm just trying to think of an independent one as well. So how is it different being a creative there? Does the disruption process come to life at a different level for what a creative just does from Ogilvy, say?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are probably a couple of things. One, disruption does actually do a really beautiful job of setting the conditions for creativity, bold creativity. So I think it's a tool that we can use to give the creatives a better shot at selling something bold and unexpected. Now, I think every agency probably has a approach to that, but ours is one that is, we have artifacts, it's very crystallized, it's a good story. Clients often, buy into it. Also, because it is rooted in rigor, the rationale to support the work is there. The rationale to create space is there. So it's good for both priming, selling, orchestrating across platforms. I think that's the other thing we talk a lot about. True disruption platforms should orchestrate everything you do. That usually allows our creatives to enter channels that they might not normally get to enter because we're kind of stewarding the brand through the platform. And I would hope that they would report that the entire culture is pointed towards bravery and brave ideas and is pushing them as much as they're pushing us. So rather than it being an uphill battle to sell interesting stuff, you've got people that are sort of behind you saying, yeah, well, could we push it further? Or how is this disruptive? I've sat in many reviews where I've said, that's funny, that's sentimental, that's emotional, but it's not disruptive. I've seen this before. And they're like, shit, you're right. You're right. Okay, we'll do better. We'll do better. So at its very best, which, I think we all have to be honest, not every brief is an opportunity for that. But at its best, I think it allows the entire culture to rally around braver work. And that's just a better environment for creatives.
Yeah, and you also have, as you said, the nomenclature, the symbols and so forth. So you've got your own take on creativity. So it's not just, hey, we need to be creative like everyone else, but this is our way of doing it. And that gives people confidence and kind of a place to stand on, which is fantastic. As individuals, do you do that to yourself at all? Can you approach, do you ever think about, oh, what am I doing here for my life? How am I disrupting my own thing?
Yeah, I think we do. And I think it's quite sobering or humbling when you have to stop and go, am I bullshitting? Or are we really living disruption? God knows I probably say it 50,000 times a day. And there have been moments, as an individual or as a leadership team where we're saying, are we living up to it? Like, we are so fortunate to have such a palpable founder feeling in a business that has now been long owned by a holdco. Like, we still wear t-shirts that say good is not good enough, and it's all the J-isms and the Lee-isms. But sometimes you have to say, are we living that? Are we being authentic to that? And I think it keeps us motivated and it keeps us honest. And sometimes we're like, yeah, no, we're not. That wasn't disruptive.
I'm amazed that the traditional agency model is still an art director and a copywriter, lots of layers of creatives, and then they have account service next to them, and then they have planners next to them. Then there's a production department down the bottom, and then there's a media agency in a different company. The whole thing's fucked up, right? And siloed and weird. And why?
And
why
hasn't been disrupted.
And it hasn't been disrupted. And you're the brand to disrupt yourselves.
I couldn't agree more. And that's often what we say to ourselves. And we have, to some degree. I mean, not all of our accounts operate that way, and not all of our agencies operate that way. But we're a little left of center on that. I wouldn't say that we've blown it up. I think that's why I'm sort of welcoming what feels like the seismic shift in the business that might actually be the seismic shift in the business. And whether that is AI or just the fact that structure we can't get paid for anymore. Like, clients just won't pay for, they just won't pay for it. So it is, sort of that crisis is forcing a disruption and a necessity to think about these things very, very differently. We always talk about, don't be the sort of wave, be the wind that creates the wave. We're not the wind in this case, but we're certainly trying to be on the leading edge of the wave of disruption that is going to fundamentally change our business.
And how are you thinking about that, Erin? How are you thinking about AI and how that's going to change the creative process and how that's going to change the creative output. Obviously, we're at the very early stages of it, but how are you starting to think about that?
I think anyone that's acting like they have it figured out is lying. But I
Oh,
think
they're all on LinkedIn. They're all on LinkedIn saying, they're AI experts and, can run a workshop with your team for several $1,000s.
yes. I mean, I think like everyone else, we see an opportunity to take a lot of the drudgery, the things that are not actually uh, premium adds to the strategy or the creative and find ways to make that more efficient. I think where we're starting to get really interested is, what happens when we feed it our proprietary thinking, rather than AI that is just trained on the internet, which means we're all going to get the sea of sameness. What happens when you put in 20 years of disruption case studies? What happens if we use some of the things that only we have? And how does that change our value proposition? Yeah, how do we use AI to give something that is a little more tailored from our point of view?
Yeah, sorry. And do you think that this might also be a situation where scale and being big might actually be an advantage of a network agency?
Yeah, I mean, certainly when you talk about like content, and the ability to feed it a lot of perspective, global perspective on lots of different categories over time. Yes, there is definitely, I think, a benefit to just having a lot of access to, like first party content where we can start to train the AI on the way that we think and not have that limited to just a US perspective or just a couple of categories that we've happened to have worked in, but rather decades of global experience. So yes.
Adam,
Yeah.
is this an ad?
This is an ad for Mutinex. Mutinex are a marketing mix modeling company.
Why do I need one of those?
Well, then you can model the return on every single marketing decision you do.
So you wouldn't do an ad like this?
You would never have to do an ad like this ever again.
Mutinex Growth OS, your best decisions start here. For more information or to request a demo, visit mutinex.co. That's mutinex.co.
Your business is still a creative output. There's still ideas and the articulation of those ideas. And you've got 700 people facing bloody strong headwinds, albeit you're capturing those headwinds and going to be on the first wave and so on. How do you inspire them? What do you do to make sure they stay focused and supported in kind of developing creative ideas? How do you manage that? How do you create a creative culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think with regard to AI, I think we're trying to empower them with tools and education so it doesn't feel scary and threatening and the thing that's coming to take their job, but rather a thing that they can harness. I mean, I think the other thing we have to do is be real, which is, look, if I was a mediocre agency with mediocre creative output and playing it really safe, I would be really scared in this moment because the truth is it will do it almost just as well, just as well. So what we pride ourselves on, which is being a different experience, being a premium experience, having a point of view on the world and on the work becomes even more important in this moment. So it is a time for us to be even more driven by our values and our sort of methodology and holding ourselves to a higher standard of work. Because if we don't have that, then we will be replaced. And I think this is where the balance, we are a big part of our destiny, but so are our client partners. And so, we're in a little bit of a moment where we're also seeing our client partners under tremendous pressure to deliver things with certainty. And that can sometimes dull your appetite for boldness and bravery. But, for us, we're having an existential crisis. And if we don't do work that is singular, we could be replaced by the machine. So it's like we're at a place where we really need to create, enough trust and safety to say, let's take some leaps together because that will be good for your business and your brand. And it will also be the thing that keeps us relevant and alive.
What I liked about your answer then was I asked you a question about your culture and you didn't answer it. But what you did is you spoke about the shared fight between your clients and the agency, and you brought them all in on the tent together. And I think that bodes well for you. I like that thought of you're in there together.
Well, and I do think that actually speaks to our culture because I think we have a deeply creative culture. And as I said, one that is that embraces sort of disruption. Our colors are yellow and gold. We talk a lot about optimism with edge. We want some prickly bits, but we are very much a client culture. Like, we love the brands that we work on. We want to be business problem solvers. Like, we're not anarchists. We're not there to be like, let's do some crazy shit and go get an award and whatever. Like, we are really invested in long-term relationships and our clients. So, our clients are a very big part of the culture that we create. The respect for that relationship is a big part of the culture that we create.
And as you think about being the leader of a creative business, we often talk to creatives on this show, and I think their role in the work and in the creative culture is really clear. As the CEO of a creative company, what's your role in creating that creative culture? How do you think about creative leadership from where you sit?
Yeah, I mean, I am very proudly a believer in creative exceptionalism. Like, as I said, I grew up in sort of Hegarty's world of intelligence and magic, but I do understand that there's a bit of it that is magic. And I think that without the rigor, that magic has no way to have impact. But without the magic, you really have nothing. So, like, I firmly believe in the power of creativity and the power of human creativity. I mean, that's where, it may be very naive, but when all the doomsday predictions of AI come, I'm just like, I don't know. It just seems from when we were like barely walking upright, we were looking for ways to express creativity and tell stories. I cannot imagine that that will go away. I have to believe that the creative, ingenuity and imagination of human beings will be worth something special, even if it looks and feels differently. So that is the part that I think is the most worth protecting in our business. So as the leader of that, first of all, I think I'm quite emotionally tied to it and motivated by it. But if I'm very objective and I'm just thinking about it as a business person, I think it is still my most valuable asset. And so I need to protect it, and I need to create conditions that serve it, because otherwise I think what I have is probably a commodity if I'm not preserving that really premium creative output.
And what are those conditions? When you really think about it, the conditions for creativity to thrive, what are they?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as I said, this is not a solo deal. We work with clients. And I fundamentally believe that client relationships are like any other human relationship. And so trust, like really being able to develop a authentic, open, honest, trusting environment for work, which, can often come down to really small things like the number of people in meetings and the permission to be honest and debate and, challenge and know when to back down and when not, all those things that seem quite small, but actually add up to the thing that makes or breaks ideas. So I think, relationship building, I do think having some of the best strategists in the world and a methodology is the best thing you can do for creativity. I think being exceptionally clever and understanding culture and how humans actually behave, and trying to see what's coming instead of just reflecting what is, I think is incredibly important for creativity. And I think now more than ever, dimensionality. So finding ways to have more skill sets, whether that is under your roof or in partnership or in the ecosystem, we have to have a broader canvas. And I think the economics of our business can make that tricky. So, we have to constantly be finding ways to give ourselves access to, if it's different tools, different technology, different creative skill sets constantly, so that canvas can expand.
Out of the other multinational agencies or the large agencies, take yourselves out of the equation. Which ones do you find inspiring? Which one do you learn from and think, shit, we need a bit of that?
Well, I mean, lots of them for different reasons. I mean, you mentioned Droga earlier. I'm fascinated to watch the life cycle of that brand. Many of the sort of um, folks that led to the great run that agency had came from BBH, and I worked with them. So I know that agency is built on good material and obviously has a real visionary at the helm. The Accenture thing, I think, woke the whole industry up. And I think for a minute we were all maybe relieved that it didn't seem to turbocharge them quite the way we thought. But I think that is a mistake to count them out. Like I think that was round one. I think they've got lots of iterations of what might come there. And I think we're starting to see that as David probably leans back into the creative agency. So I think that's one that's very, very interesting in terms of what they have the potential to do. I think Wyden, while maybe not as multinational, still has some global footprint, and I think is one that has just consistently been strong over the years, has a clear culture, does work that we're envious of.
Do you think they all fly business? Do you think they all fly business class or economy at Wyden?
I don't know.
We've had this conversation before on the pod.
They all fly business class.
Hey, I'm interested. That's obviously your agency competition, but another I think dynamic in the marketplace right now is in-housing, right? Like big clients wanting to do more of it themselves, bring capability. And are you seeing a lot of that with your clients in the States? And how are you thinking about that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, sure. We definitely are. I mean, I'm probably a little bit biased on this because both of the clients that I worked at had pretty robust internal, I don't know if I'd call them full agencies, but certainly creative groups. And what I saw was they are incredibly good at doing some things. And then there are places where there are real limitations without an external perspective, some of that dimensionality that I talked about. There probably are a few exceptions where they have been able to build fully sort of expressed internal agencies, but I think most of the brands, even when they have big internal groups, are still going outside for certain projects, and whether it's strategic or certain briefs where they are looking for external help from agencies, because we still, I think, attract the best talent. I think we still are able to get a little bit more of that dimension that they can't always hire in-house. We are a little bit removed from the sun, so to speak. And that can be good because we will try things and do things that they are now self-censoring themselves out of. I think the best cases are where you've got really strong internal creative minds working with really strong agencies. I think where you see some of the best work, it's actually the collaboration of the two, because it is hard sometimes for agencies when we are talking to marketing teams who are wired to do something actually that isn't what we do. And so when they have really strong creative partners and leaders internally, they can get the best out of their agencies. I think that's quite a good mix. I welcome working with internal groups, but I still think that there's room for all of us. So I think what most clients also find is like it's a pain in the ass to do it all yourself. Like that's a lot to manage. It's a lot to pay for. It's a lot to integrate. And I think the pendulum kind of swings. You see people in-house and then you see it, going out. I tend to think it'll land somewhere in the middle.
I think the in-housing is just forcing the agencies to push further upstream. So I think the consultancy market is very, very strong globally. So I think clients are looking for consultancies a lot. And I think the in-housing is being done at quite an executional level most of the time. It's kind of having a good effect. It's pushing the value up of agencies, not down, if you can kind of ride that wave, if you know what I mean a bit.
Yeah.
Hey, Erin, you've mentioned a few times about Gatorade, and every time you've mentioned it, we've pushed it aside a little bit because we haven't wanted to speak about it, because we're going to speak about it now. And the way we're going to do that...
Before we do the pub test, should we get Erin to describe the idea?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, ask her.
Yeah.
Ask her.
So, Erin, we like to focus on one piece of work, and the piece of work that we want to focus on from your agency is the Gatorade. It's in you. Is that the one?
Bring out the it.
The one with Michael Jordan. Do you want to tell us about that idea, how it came about?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it marks sort of a return of that line in many ways. So we had Is It In You a long time ago, and we've sort of been on this journey with Gatorade where they became absolute category dominant monsters, and still are. But, they started to see the category shifting a little bit. There was more competition than ever before. And with, more people sort of coming in with different technologies or formulas for hydration and recovery, like starting to doubt the science. And so, we got very sort of focused on electrolytes and those kind of things, very functional for a while. But I think where Gatorade, the beauty of Gatorade is its ability to, yes, deliver a very science-backed, proposition, but also to just capture the essence of sport and that culture. And so as we were thinking about how to sort of reignite that brand, in many ways it made sense to go back to like the essential, is it in you? And obviously there's a double meaning there because it's a product that you ingest, but we've always believed that the power of Gatorade was understanding the sort of intangible qualities of an athlete or of someone who is inspired by sort of competitive athletes. So that was sort of the is it in you, but framed in the current context, which is there's a lot of hype around sports. When we sort of did some fundamental consumer work a while ago, many years ago, it was at a time when the exterior, like the kit, was all the rage, and it was like, oh, if you had Nike and where were the sponsorships, and the focus had shifted sort of on things that shouldn't matter. And in some ways we see that to a degree with some of the culture around sports, some of it which is great, extending into different places, but also that hype culture that can kind of distract from the essence of what you need as a resilient, perseverant athlete. So it was about sort of going back, but framing it in a very modern context of sport.
And part of going back
was getting an up-and-coming
athlete called Michael Jordan.
Yeah, young up-and-coming athlete.
Is that part of it? He embodies that sort of spirit you're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, in that piece, you see both some of the most emerging talent, but also, I think it is hard to argue that Michael Jordan is not the quintessential sort of, representation of like digging deep, mental toughness, all of those kind of qualities. And it sort of harkens back to a lot of the work that was done in that time. He was featured in that work in, back in the day. And so, yeah, he kind of reappears here. I think it speaks to the timelessness of those values.
So we take pieces of work and put them in the pub test. The pub test is done in Australia. So they may miss out on some of the kind of the US-centric stuff about this.
But fair to say Michael Jordan is fairly global.
Yeah. Fairly.
Yeah.
Newer athletes they might miss.
Let's have a listen to what they said. We use a research company called Ideally who helps power the pub test. So if you've got any issues with this, blame Ideally. All right, let's have a listen.
The pub test is brought to you by Ideally, the online research platform that's better than a pub test.
If you want to do a pub test on your own, don't. Go to Ideally instead.
It's like a pub test, except it's really a test.
What does this ad feel like it's for? I mean, apart from the few moments where you see colour-coded sweat dripping down their face, I don't know, it could be for any sports brand, really. It feels like a Nike ad to me.
I think this ad feels like it's for anyone who plays sport, even if it's just recreationally or professionally. It's like at the core of sport.
Capital S sports fans.
Like, it's obviously very sports focused, but it might kind of feel like it's a ad for Nike, but then obviously it's Gatorade.
Is Michael Jordan still relevant today? I think so.
I definitely think Michael Jordan's still relevant today. What a legend.
I understand that he's a signifier of excellence. Yeah, enough, I think.
I think Michael Jordan is always going to be relevant because he's kind of, the GOAT.
I don't know, it just feels like a generic sports ad to me. It doesn't really feel like there's any human truth about Gatorade in sport. It just kind of feels like, is it in you? What's it? Okay, Gatorade.
I think this ad is relevant.
It feels more nostalgic than relevant to me.
This ad makes me feel every training session, every run, every bit of sweat, you're just like refilling your body with the greatest fuel.
I kind of feel like I wasn't really taught anything new.
I'm uncomfortable with orange sweat and that makes me reconsider Gatorade.
Does this pass the pub test? No, it's forgettable, not memorable. Doesn't give me any human truth about Gatorade.
I don't think it's memorable or significant, so no, it doesn't pass the pub test for me.
This 100% passes the pub test.
No, I'm not sure if this one does pass the pub test.
So we don't hear those until you do. There's a mixed reaction there.
Yeah. Well, it certainly passed the sales test. So
Nice.
Gatorade is very happy with the performance of that work. And it certainly has passed the press reaction test, at least in the US, the market it was designed for. It's gotten tremendous response because in some ways the nostalgia, is appealing because it's so intentionally used alongside, some of the new athletes, which again, I think in your market, they may not recognize, without them being called out. Because I think the whole point is, as the category is trying to convince you other things matter, it is actually the same thing that matters, which is what's in you. I love the guy who said, well, except for the colored sweat part, it's like, well, yeah, the color, that's the part, that's the Gatorade part. So I'm happy that even the people who didn't like it, he's like, yeah, so what's so different? What's in you? I mean, yeah, Gatorade, but what else? It's like, well, yeah, that's the whole point of the ad. So there seemed to be good comprehension even for the people who didn't like it.
It's that classic thing, right? And obviously, look, it's pretty crude research, but it is that classic thing that we are inviting criticism and we are inviting people to sort of, it's not how people actually react to advertising. So when you get that sort of response and when clients get that sort of response, how do you think you need to think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is why research is so tricky, because it is not like a accurate reading of how people feel in their minds or in their hearts because they're being asked a question. They feel like they need to have a smart answer. Nobody wants to admit that they're compelled by advertising and that they're fooled by our trickery of trying to play on their emotion or their nostalgia. So, I think we try and obviously set up ahead of time with our clients that, like, look, we have to be open-minded. We have to hear what they say, and we have to be able to face real critique and criticism. But also we have to know that this is not a totally accurate reading of how people will act and respond. Yeah. And so we need to use it as an input, as a data point, and not a deciding point. And I think this is where testing has become so dangerous, because I think under the pressure our clients are facing, I think they are looking for things to kind of get themselves off the hook of having to make a decision. They don't want to make the wrong one. So if they say, well, we tested it and this tested well, even if it tanked, it's replaced conviction and gut, which I think is dangerous.
You know why I like Ideally, Adam?
Why, Brent?
It's fast. You get insights overnight. And I think the main thing is it's not trying to test whether an idea should live or die, but it's trying to give you real insights that you can build on and make the creative better.
That sounded like an ad.
Because it was.
Do you know why I like Ideally?
Why?
Because they sponsor the black T-shirts.
They do.
If you want to do a pub test on your own, don't. Go to Ideally instead.
That's right. Visit goideally.com. That's goideally.com and find out how they can help.
We've slagged off pre-testing way too many times in this conversation, in this thing to go on any further on that. You said there was an interesting point in the ad, which is you used Michael Jordan, you used the classic line, you reignited all those latent memory structures, or however we want to put it. And that has triggered immediate sales, as you've said. Do you think you needed to put in the emerging sports stars, or did the client ask you for that so you could capture a new generation of consumers? Do you think you needed to do that? Was that part of the story?
Yeah, it was always part of the idea. I mean, that wasn't a clients forcing us to do it, because I think the point is sort of the products, like the values, are transcendent from generation to generation. And so I think we would have, the intention was not to set out to make an old, like, remember the good old days kind of ad. We were certainly pulling from that, but that stuff is just as relevant and potent today. And so having the newer generation of athletes, I think, was an important part of that, of that story. Also, I think you have to remember that Gatorade doesn't just run one piece of communication at a time. I mean, that brand is blessed with budget that allows them to have a couple of different things in market that are complementary to one another, or running, as part of a total comms mix. So, what ran, maybe not at the same time, but right around this time was, a very simple spot of Caitlin Clark, who is, the hottest new recruit into the WNBA, kind of in like when the camera wasn't supposed to be rolling, just hitting three after three after three, no voiceover, no nothing, very quiet. And it's just another view of that standard of excellence and what it takes inside and all those things. So, this is, it is part of a total, comms package.
I think it's interesting, though, to tap into the heritage and legacy of the brand. I think too many brands are obsessed with the new and sort of aren't prepared to look back and aren't prepared to embrace
Totally agree.
their heritage. I think it's a great thing, and I think you're trying to find a way to be timeless and timely. You know what I mean? At the same time, which isn't easy to do.
No, and part of the disruption here was actually using a nostalgia, not meant to be nostalgic, but an old line and Michael Jordan, because the competition has been trying to paint us as your father's sports drink again. And Gatorade is old and we're the new thing, and we've got the newest stars and we've got the new, and this was a way of us sort of flexing our confidence of like, we're not afraid of that history. Like, we are totally confident with our formula, with our stable of athletes, with what we stand for. And so it was quite bold, actually, to say a little bit like F you, like you're trying to say that, but that is still motivating. That is still the standard for excellence. We are still on the sideline.
I assume Gatorade's got sugar and no sugar variants, right?
Yeah.
Do you know, do the sugar variants still outsell the no sugar variants massively?
I don't know. I would have to
Right.
look at their
We'll edit that. We'll edit that out.
No, what? No, it's like just in terms of that nostalgia and your dad's sports drink and so on. Like, I also think at a product level, brands are too quick to change what they're made of in order to kind of appease the latest trend or whatever it might be. Whereas what people want from that sports drink may in fact be.
Well, of course, with sports drinks too, the biggest audience are people sitting on the couch, not actually exercising, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think so.
Well, I certainly think that Gatorade has had a pretty powerful like R&D group for a while, and they are thinking, a lot of the messaging is focused on sort of a core competitive athlete, but they have very consciously expanded their portfolio and our communications to talk to a more of like a forever athlete. So whatever state, whether you're a former athlete who still jogs or does, Soul Cycle, or, you're like me who like, if I can get a few miles in, it's like a marathon practically. Like they've got something for you to meet you where you're at. And the
Adam
formula,
Adam's a forever athlete.
I am.
Well, you're a forever athlete.
I'm a forever walking athlete.
You are walking a lot,
walking
actually.
a lot.
Yeah, you are walking. Hey, now, Erin, you did spend some time client side, and then you came back to agencies. What was it that made you want to come back? What did you miss? What were you not getting from your client side roles?
Well, I don't think I would have come back for just any role, to be honest. I really did believe, first of all, Shy at Los Angeles is about as iconic as you can get, certainly in the US market. TBWA and the disruption methodology was something that felt very familiar from my time at BBH. So I knew it was an organization that I could kind of flex into pretty easily. And then the opportunity to work for Troy, who's our global CEO, was very appealing. So I think if any agency had called me up, it might not have been right. I think this one, it was like, gosh, it's really hard to resist a lot of these things. Also, I did miss the culture of agencies, where really the idea is what drives everybody. And that, while you have your little friction between departments and this and that, like we fundamentally get on the same team and we drive towards something, and we will run through walls to put something out great in the world. And that level of camaraderie and sort of shared focus, I didn't find client side. Yes, of course, they're all motivated by doing something good, but I was actually shocked to find how easily it descended into, oh, well, it's merch's fault, it's sales' fault, it's design's fault. It was like, wait a minute, aren't we all together? Like, let's rally around, like I think agency cultures, just have that a little bit more. I miss that. I missed a little bit of the misfits of agencies. I do think they attract some of the most interesting people, most original people. And so I missed that. And I also missed being at sort of the bleeding edge of culture and technology in media. I found as a client, I had other things I needed to master, our category dynamics, our competition, I spent much more time in the commercial reality of the business, which was very, very good stuff and personally led to a lot of growth. But what that meant I wasn't doing, because we were paying our agencies to do it, was keeping up on really what's happening in culture, what's emerging in technology. And I missed, I missed that.
And when you first joined, was Lee Clow still around?
Lee was not in the business day to day, but he was still around. He was mostly doing work for the sort of more and even at that, there was something at the time called Mal for Good, which was working with Steve Jobs' wife on some more philanthropic things. But he was still around as like a point of inspiration.
And did he give you some advice as the new CEO?
And not so much in that way. I mean, he didn't sort of sit down and say, "Let me tell you," what, but he definitely, well, he gave us like quite collectively a piece of advice. So when we turned I think it was when we were turning 50, when Chiat was turning 50 years old. And I think Lee was, definitely starting to exit the business day to day. He made a video for all of us called Do the Brave Thing. And it's a beautifully written thing that says, don't do the right thing. Don't do the wrong thing, of course, but don't do the right thing. Do the brave thing. And to disrupt or not is a choice. To be brave or not is a choice. And it was sort of a call. I think he probably saw where the industry was heading. I mean, even then. And I think he felt we all needed to hear that doing the right thing was not always the right thing, and that you had to consciously and intentionally be disruptive and brave and have conviction in that. And so that was, I think, the piece of advice that, was not meant for our clients. It was meant for us internally.
That sounds a bit like a black T-shirt, don't you think, Adam?
Erin, if you had to channel that plus everything else you've ever learnt about creativity and your approach to ideas and the creative process and developing interesting things, how would you sum up your creative philosophy on a black T-shirt?
God knows we have a million T-shirts floating around with all these quips. There is one that's floating around that I quite like, which is make it smart, make it beautiful, make it fun. Because I do believe that if you do that in your culture and in your work, you can really create something that has tremendous impact on business, on society. I mean, I think I'm not foolish about what we do. I get that we're commercial. And, we're commercial art at our best. But I do actually think we have really big platforms, and we can tell stories and do things that change society, not just reflect it. And so I think to get to that, whether it's business impact or societal impact or just personal impact, if you live by make it smart, make it beautiful, make it fun, probably be in a pretty good place.
Erin Riley, thank you for coming on our podcast and making our podcast smarter, more beautiful, and more fun. It was great to meet you and hang out. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you guys very much. It's been a good time.
Unreal. God bless. Thank
Cheers.
you so much.
I mean, I want to be like Erin when I grow up.
No, you don't. And you are. You're grown up. You're older than she is. What are you saying? Hey, she was what I found fascinating about Erin is A good company needs to give its people good things to work with. They have got a fantastic backstory, amazing clients, strong model, good systems and processes. They are a creative factory. That is TBWA. And she's also said the same thing about BBH in a way. And she's stewarding that. And that's fantastic. So lots of legs up for every creative soul who enters that building. It's also potentially their undoing.
How so?
Because the better they are at what they did, the harder it is to change. And, there wasn't, how we disrupting ourselves, there was a lot of we should. There wasn't much on what they're actually doing, with all respect to Erin. It's bloody hard. But I'm just saying, the better you are at the old model, the harder it is for you to change. And I get a bit out of that.
Yeah. It's interesting though, right? I do think we have celebrated a lot of independent agencies on here, but a lot of their models are the same too. It's still creative teams, creative briefs.
Totally.
It's very similar to the old model. It's not like they're massively reinventing.
Let's take an independent agency born 10 years ago. They would have done some things to reinvent themselves, but maybe that agency is not set up for the agency developed today, or where you've got a more appropriate model for today, which is very different to a model that was 10 years ago. So the same challenge still applies. It's just that if you've been plying your craft for 50 years or whatever, then you're going to be really good at what you did, and it just gets harder and harder to be good at what you at the next thing.
And look, how many corporate stories do we have of the very successful legacy company that couldn't disrupt itself? I mean,
That's right. But if your proposition is disruption, then you must be good at applying that to yourself.
I did love it. Passed the sales test.
Yeah, it's good. She was very, very good. If I was at TBWA, I'd be feeling like my creativity is being nurtured and we're in good hands.
And if I was a client, American client, I would feel that in spades.
And
right?
I'd feel like I'm in the tent and we're creating stuff together, which is super important.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was great. Fascinating.
Thank you very much. God bless.
Good.